أهلا بكم. بعد أشهر من الأخذ والرد أعطت ألمانيا الموافقة الرسمية لبولندا كي تزود أوكرانيا بدبابات ليوبارد الألمانية، مع تعاظم النداءات التي تدعو الدول الغربية والتحالفات العسكرية لتزويد أوكرانيا بأسلحة نوعية وثقيلة، وسط مخاوف من هجوم روسي مرتقب عبر عنه أمين عام الناتو عشية الذكرى الأولى على اندلاع الحرب. نناقش هذا الملف وغيره من تفاصيل تبعات الحرب الروسية على أوكرانيا في الدول المجاورة التي باتت جزءا من تلك الحرب. إذن نناقش هذا الملف مع نائب وزير خارجية بولندا بافيل جابلونسكي الذي ينضم إلينا من العاصمة البولندية وارسو. أستاذ بافيل، أهلا وسهلا بك في أخبار الآن.
شكرا.
بداية، تزويد أوكرانيا بدبابات ليوبارد أمر جديد نسبيا، لم يكن ذلك يناقش كما هو اليوم. ما هي الأسباب التي دفعت الشروع إلى تزويد أوكرانيا بمعدات عسكرية ثقيلة ومتقدمة برأيكم؟
Well, in fact, Poland has already supplied to Ukraine over 300 tanks and heavy equipment, the armed vehicles. Already in May and June, we have done that. These were all the Soviet or post-Soviet tanks that were in our armed forces, and we decided to pass them to Ukraine so that Ukraine can use them to fight against Russian aggression. And Ukraine has been doing it very effectively. It managed to reclaim a lot of territory that was occupied by Russia around Kharkiv, around Kherson. This was done to a very large degree using these Polish tanks, these tanks that we gave to Ukraine. Now Russia has mobilized additional hundreds of thousands of people to the army. They have sent many of their own tanks on the Eastern Front and Southern Front especially, and Ukraine obviously needs to defend itself. This is why it is so important to give to Ukraine the best tanks that we have at our disposal, and one of the best are these German Leopard tanks that are in Poland and in many other European countries.
نعم سيد بافيل، هذا الجدل حول تلك الدبابات يدفعنا إلى السؤال التالي: ما مدى مساهمة تلك الدبابات في إحداث تغيير على الأرض لمساعدة أوكرانيا في الدفاع عن أراضيها؟ يعني لماذا تعتبر تلك الدبابات بحسبكم مهمة جدا؟
Oh, they are very important, and Ukraine is very capable of using them effectively. They have shown already last year, especially in August and September, when they have been using both the tanks, also the howitzers, the rocket systems, HIMARS and Crab howitzer that was given by Poland, that they are able to use it very effectively. If they will receive these tanks, this can truly change the face of this aggression, that Russian aggression can not only be stopped, but Ukraine is really able to repel Russia from its territory, to reclaim the territory that is being occupied. This is very important that we do it because Russia is also preparing another offensive. It's mobilizing another hundreds of thousands of troops, and they want to attack Ukraine even stronger again. This is why Ukraine needs everything to defend itself.
اليوم بعد موافقة ألمانيا على إرسال تلك الدبابات إلى أوكرانيا، السؤال هو سيد بافيل: متى من المتوقع أن تصبح تلك الدبابات على الأرض حيز التنفيذ في أوكرانيا؟
Depending on the logistics, obviously, because it's a very complex process, and obviously it also requires some training of the crews, but this training is already actually taking place in preparation for it. It is a matter of, I would say, several weeks that it would require all the process to be completed. This is why it's very important. Every day matters here, and we are constantly, every day, talking to our partners in Europe. We are talking obviously mostly to our partners in Germany, but what is also very important is that Germany also joins us, and that Germany also supplies its share of tanks, because if every country gives 20, 30 tanks, it will truly become a very important power. If we are able to create a tank brigade or two brigades, it can change the face of this aggression.
نعم، من الواضح أنه كان هناك نوع من التململ أو ربما التردد في ألمانيا فيما يخص إرسال تلك الدبابات إلى كييف. هل برأيكم أن هذا الموقف الذي رأيناه من ألمانيا سيؤثر على قيادتها للقارة الأوروبية أو على دورها القيادي برأيكم؟
Well, this is certainly very bad for peace in Europe, for safety of all the countries, because we always need to remember that if Russia is not stopped, if we allow Russia to win this aggressive war, then there will be more wars, more aggression. Russia doesn't seem to be willing to stop if it's not forced to stop. And Germany is very important here because, unfortunately, for many, many years and decades before, Germany has been doing this policy in a very pro-German way, and this was because of many reasons, starting from the mere corruption, because many of German politicians, members of industry, the members of various circles, academic journalists, they were being simply corrupted by Russia, even up to the level of former Chancellor Schroeder, who was given very luxurious seats in Russian companies. So they were being rewarded for their pro-Russian policy. And many people in Germany are still very much pro-Russian. They are obviously not very open about it these days, but their effective policy is still very reluctant, very hesitant, as you said. So it's very important to change this, and we are constantly working on a diplomatic level to do it. Also underlining the fact that if it doesn't change, it will be very bad for Europe and for Germany as well, because it will damage their reputation, their leadership, their credibility. This is very important to continue the diplomatic work, and we are doing this with our partners.
ما حصل بشأن تلك الدبابات أضاء ربما على تباين في المواقف داخل الاتحاد الأوروبي. برأيك هل حاولت موسكو التلاعب بالخلافات بين الدول الأوروبية حول تلك القضية خدمة لأجندتها؟
Well, obviously, there are many attempts at manipulate to promote disinformation. It's globally present, both in Arab world, in African countries, in Europe as well. There's a lot of attempts of disinformation. So we constantly need to be vigilant. We constantly need to remind what the facts are, constantly need to be present, open, also ready to answer even the most difficult questions. This is the approach that we have, and we will certainly continue to do so. Also reaching out to our partners so that these facts are being known, these facts are being accessible. We will certainly run our policy and our politics in precisely this way.
ما رأيك في قدرة موسكو على التأثير في صناعة القرار الألماني تحديداً، وكيف على الحلفاء الأوروبيين مواجهة ذلك التأثير؟
Oh, there are a lot of attempts, obviously, by Russia, also by other stakeholders, but Russia has been very active in Europe, in many other parts of the world, in Africa and Middle East as well, that they want not only to promote the narrative, but they also want to influence people from these countries to do the same, because they are obviously more credible, they are more able to convince and influence the public opinion. So it's very important to contradict it, and not to contradict it, but also to prevent it by publicly speaking out against such attempts. If somebody is presenting pro-Russian narrative, and especially if it's taking money for it, they need to be exposed and put to public questions, because if somebody does it, then there must be some interest in it, and public opinion deserves the right to know the facts, and it also deserves the right to know who is financing such efforts to distort the facts. We are doing this. We are countering disinformation. It very often leads to a heated political debate, but this is also the nature of pluralism, of democracy, that if we have access to many sources of information and all the members of society have it, then they are able to verify the facts and decide for themselves. This is the principle that we abide by.
سيد بافيل، كخلاصة في هذا الشق تحديدا، هل تعتقد أن ملف تزويد أوكرانيا بدبابات ليوبارد قسم الحلفاء الأوروبيين أو ساهم في اتحادهم ضد روسيا؟
Well, it certainly showed some divisions, but in order to assess whether it was a positive or negative factor, we need to see what will be the final result of it. Because if we are able to deliver despite our differences, as it was in the past, for example, with sanctions on Russian gas or oil. There were a lot of differences starting in February last year. But in the end, we managed to have a compromise, to have a unified approach of the European Union. It was a very difficult process. Poland was one of the leaders of this, a very ambitious approach. And we were often impatient. We were often told that there are no effects. And it was true for some time, but then we managed to achieve these effects. And in this case, I think that we are also on a very good path. Obviously, it's still far from being completed, but if we are able to get there, then the final outcome, the final result will be positive and also will serve as a unifying factor. And we are optimistic, hopeful for that.
نعم، يعني على ضوء هذا الدعم الكبير من بولندا إلى أوكرانيا، هل تتخوفون من نقص في السلاح أو المعدات العسكرية البولندية على ضوء كل ما يقدم إلى كييف؟
We do not fear this because at the same time, when we are supplying Ukraine with tanks, with howitzers, with other equipment, we are resupplying our own army. And this is very important to underline that we are modernizing our army. We are actually increasing the defense budget for the next year. It will be the historically highest defense budget in Poland's history. Obviously, there is this narrative that we are allegedly remaining without any arms, any defense for our own security. But in fact, this is also being spread by various pro-Russian sources, pro-Russian circles, because in fact, if we are giving this equipment, these weapons for Ukraine for the purpose of defeating Russian aggression, this is the best way to increase our safety and security. And actually, if this equipment, if these tanks are being used for this purpose, it not only doesn't it decrease the security in Poland, but it improves it.
سيد بافيل، بعيدا عن الميدان أيضا هناك حرب معلومات تقودها روسيا في أوروبا. ماذا تفعل الحكومة البولندية لمواجهة تلك الحرب، لمواجهة البروباغندا الروسية وبث ما هو يتناقض والوقائع على الأرض؟
Oh, we are obviously coordinating these efforts with our other allies in Europe and other partners that are willing to join, because it's obviously very important to communicate it to the general public, but also, and this is one of the most important things, to identify those actors, those sources that are actually the keys to Russian propaganda, to Russian disinformation. So what we are doing is using our information, exchanging it with our partners to identify the patterns, the sources, and also to learn what tactics of disinformation are being employed by Russia, training our officials and members of various media circles, journalists, how not to be fooled by them, how to react, what to do, where to find sources of the facts, how to contradict this false narrative. This has been done for several months now, even before the invasion started, and this is quite effective. I think in Poland and other Central European countries, this is very difficult to find any pro-Russian media, pro-Russian source that wouldn't be immediately contradicted by facts.
نعم، دعني أسألك، حرق القرآن الكريم في ستوكهولم الأسبوع الماضي أساء إلى المسلمين، وقد أوضحت بعض المعلومات أن أدوات روسية تقف خلف ذلك العمل لوقف انضمام السويد إلى الناتو. كيف تعلق على ذلك؟ وبرأيك من هو المستفيد من ما حصل ومما يحصل أيضا في بعض المدن الأوروبية اليوم؟
First of all, I need to say that this is a despicable act that we all condemn, that we believe should never take place in any society, because we should always respect each other. We should always respect each other's beliefs, and we condemn it with full force. And if we are discussing what and who could be behind it, it certainly needs to be taken into account that Russia very often employs such tactics in order to show divisions. We also observe such attempts in Poland. They are creating various groups allegedly being very patriotic or supporting Poland's Polish nation, but in fact being purposefully installed in our country to show divisions, to create tensions, and also to be against Ukraine. So we see that various tactics are being employed, and I am quite convinced that Russia is doing it in many countries, including Sweden as well.
يعني تتحدث عن مجموعات زرعت في بولندا للتسويق لروسيا ودفع الشعب البولندي ضد أوكرانيا. أخبرنا أكثر عن تلك المجموعات، ماذا تستثمر؟ ما هو الخطاب التي تعتمد عليه؟
I would say that there are two main angles of doing this in Poland. One is the general anti-Western, anti-EU sentiment that Russian propagandists are trying to use it in order to lure those people that are not enthusiastic, for example, about the European Union, because obviously there is a group of people that are against. This is a natural thing in democracy that you don't have to support every alliance that Poland is in. But then obviously Russia is trying to present itself as a defender of the traditional values and so on. In fact, obviously, Russia is the epitome of being against traditional values. There is a lot of abortions in Russia. There is a lot of divorce. Family values are not protected in Russia. To the contrary, actually, Russia is one of the worst countries in this regard, but they are trying to present the other narrative. The second, and this is more locally directed policy that Russia is installing, is trying to capitalize on the historical differences between Poland and Ukraine. And there have been many historical differences, as we are neighbors. Obviously, this, I think, is natural for many neighbors. In the past, especially during the Second World War, so 8 years ago, there were many crimes committed by Ukrainian people against Polish people. And we obviously remember that this is still not fully reconciled. But we know that during this time of Russian aggression, we still want to support Ukraine. But Russia is trying to create a narrative that because of this things from the past, Poland should be against Ukraine, and they are trying to convince people to be in this camp. This is the other narrative that they are using.
نعم سيد بافيل، بالسؤال الأخير، إلى أي مدى تستعد بولندا لسيناريو تنتهي فيه الحرب الأوكرانية بحل الاتحاد الروسي كما نعرفه اليوم، ويعني ذلك أننا ندخل في فترة من اللا استقرار ومن الفوضى. هل أنتم مستعدون لهكذا سيناريو؟
Oh, it's difficult to discuss such ideas, such scenarios, because it's very vague and uncertain. Obviously, things like that have been happening in the past, but from our perspective, what is most important is not the dissolution of Russian Federation or any changes of this sort. What is important is that this Russian imperialistic approach, this approach that is currently being employed, to recreate the old Soviet dominance over Europe. And this is precisely what they are doing. They want to recreate Soviet Union and Soviet Empire. This approach needs to be defeated. This imperialism needs to be defeated, because otherwise Europe will never be safe, because otherwise Russia will continue to attack, will continue to invade other countries. This is the prerequisite to everything, to any stable peace in Europe, because we will simply not be safe if Russia is still here in the shape that it's there. And whether it changes the form of government, whether it changes from being a federation to confederation or one unified state, this is a secondary matter. It should be for the people of Russia to decide. Right now, people of Russia are not able to decide because they are being under control of this Putin regime. Obviously, many people in Russia support it. We always need to remember that as well. But what is most important is that Russia is defeated, is expelled from Ukraine, which it invaded, and that it's forced to stop future aggressions against any other country.
نائب وزير خارجية بولندا بافيل جابلونسكي، أشكرك جزيل الشكر، كنت معنا مباشرة من وارسو. شكرا لكم على المتابعة.